These are my top 13 favorite stories in the entire world. Yes, you heard me right. 13, one extra, lucky you. This is a baker's dozen, if you will, because you're special and also because I really could not narrow it down to just 12. I think you're going to see why by the end of the video. Welcome to All About Stories. I am Renee, the pretty paladin, and if any of these are also on your favorites list, I think that you should subscribe because we are going to get along very well. These stories fall under a variety of storytelling mediums. For example, books, movies, TV shows, also podcasts, and I threw in a graphic novel and an anime in there as well. There are only two criteria for this list. One is that it has to be a complete story, meaning it has a beginning, a middle, it wraps up at the end, and it has to convey some sort of overall message or have a significant meaning behind it. The second criteria is that I must have gone back to rewatch, re-listen, or reread these stories at least one time. I wanted to make sure that these are stories that I have consciously gone back to re-experience. So without further ado, in no particular order, the first story on this list is also my favorite movie of all time, and that is Howl's Moving Castle. This is a Hayao Miyazaki Studio Ghibli film. It follows the story of Sophie, a young girl, on her adventure to sort of come into her own and find herself as she is battling the curse of a jealous witch and also falling in love with a powerful wizard. The story is a steampunk fantasy set in a sort of pseudo-England type of country, and it's one of my favorites because of the magic, of course. I'm a big fan of magic and fantasy. I love the romance of it as well, not just the romance between the two main characters, but the romance of the setting. It has an overall message of being true to yourself, being confident, as well as being kind and standing up for what you believe in. Of course, as a young girl, I fell in love with Howl and identified parts of myself in Sophie as well. I love the overall whimsy and aesthetic of the movie. I love the sweetness of the characters. I think the music and soundtrack is beautiful. If I had to pick one movie to watch for the rest of my life, it would be Howl's Moving Castle. The second story on my list is a TV show plus a movie. It is Firefly and Serenity. Firefly is a space western sci-fi series set many, many years in the future. It was originally ideated, written, and created by Joss Whedon. It is without a doubt one of the best TV shows ever. The setting is brilliant, mixing classic Western tropes with Eastern Asian elements in a space science fiction setting. The characters are unique and diverse. They are well-rounded. There is good, healthy conflict between them, as well as a deep sense of camaraderie and love. There is comedy. This is a funny show, and the comedy feels very natural to the story and the setting. It never feels shoehorned in or like the jokes were put in there just for laughs. And it dives into some deep and unsettling themes that makes it a very well-rounded series. Number 3 on my list is a classic, Harry Potter, the books, not the movies. I read the books when I was young. They were, I think, the first sort of big chapter books that I started to read. So they really have a deep nostalgic place in my heart. I remember being in middle school or high school waiting for the final book to come out. It was a big deal. My whole family was waiting for it. We had to fight over who was going to get to read it first. I love the magic of these books. I love the realistic way that the characters grow up throughout the series and the way that the story kind of grows up as well. It becomes a little darker, a little more mature. Unfortunately, some of my audio got corrupted. Moving on to story number 4, Angelic Layer, an anime and manga series by Clamp. This series follows a young Masaki Suzuhara as she moves to Tokyo for the first time to live with her aunt. and becomes involved in a game called Angelic Layer, which is where players create these little, about 6 to 10 inch sized dolls that fight on a angelic layer, a sort of magic high-tech battleground, and they control the movements of these dolls with their minds and fight each other. I think the target audience for the series is young girls. It's very cute. All of the different characters and their battle angels, little dolls, have very fun and unique outfits and aesthetics. I think it falls somewhere around the magical girl trope, but it is definitely very unique. I can't think of any other series that follows a concept like this one. And while on the surface, it looks and sounds just like a kind of fun, lighthearted anime, this show has a lot of emotional stakes. It takes on some very serious topics at points and follows the relationships between the main character, Masaki, and her friends or the other people that she meets while playing this game, and her sort of search for her estranged mother. And there are the overall themes of doing your best, never giving up, even in the face of challenge or defeat, handling that with grace and picking yourself up off the ground to continue your own personal fight and journey. We are going to do we are going to take a hard left turn here to the next story on my list. Number 5, this is The Prestige. This is a movie by Christopher Nolan, definitely one of my favorite directors. It was a hard choice between The Prestige and Inception for this list, but I think the overall emotional and relational story of The Prestige has me hooked a little bit more than Inception does. This story is sort of a historical psychological thriller set in the late 1800s, and it follows 2 stage magicians as they are first sort of learning and coming up together as friends and buddies, and then separating along the way and becoming rivals. And the lengths that they both go to in order to be the best magicians that they possibly can, as well as beat out the other one. Now, this story has twists. It is largely character focused. There are several questions posed in the beginning of the movie that as the audience, you absolutely don't know the answer to. Some of these questions aren't even answered until the very last seconds of the movie. This story spans years and years. You're looking at sort of the mid to later lifetime of both of the main characters. And there is an element of sort of fantastical supernatural magic that one of them engages in that is to some degree grounded in reality and then to some degree completely bonkers. Both of the main characters are intensely flawed people. If you watched my previous video on Dune, you will know that I love flawed characters. And the reveal at the end of the movie blew me away. It was the perfect culmination of all of the tension and foreshadowing leading up to it. All of the decisions that the characters made complete sense by the end. And this movie gets even better when you rewatch it and you know how it ends and you can see how everything kind of unfolds and plays out throughout the course of the movie. Number 6, we are almost halfway through. This one is going to be another sort of turn into right field, I'm going to say. This is a podcast, actually. So I love Dungeons and Dragons. There are lots of actual play Dungeons and Dragons shows out there. This one that I'm about to name is the very first one that I listened to. It is called Not Another D&D Podcast, and it is their first campaign. I'm not quite sure how to describe what this is. If you know, you know. If you don't know, it's Dungeons and Dragons is a role-playing game where you are either a player or the dungeon master, the game master. It is part writing, storytelling, part role-playing, part improvisation, part math. There's a lot of math. You oftentimes have an actual physical game board and there's lots of rules to the game. And this campaign, NADDPOD Campaign 1, is, in my opinion, one of the best, well-rounded Dungeons and Dragons stories out there. It has all the elements from a classic Dungeons and Dragons world, along with some brilliant storytelling, some amazing improv and acting from the players and the DM as well. It has comedy, it's very funny, it has heart, it is sweet and emotional. These characters are lovable and they're goofy and they're silly, but when the time comes, they can throw down with the best of them. They can do what needs to be done. This campaign lasts a perfect 100 episodes. Each episode is about an hour and a half long, so that is a lot of content. And this story jumps around, and this stuffy, and this story, and this stuffy, oh my God, again. And this story covers all of the classic Dungeons and Dragons locations, tropes, themes. These characters are trying to save the main material plane. They go to the Feywild, they go to Shadowfell, they go to the astral plane. They fight gods, they fight monsters, they fight demons, they fight devils. This campaign also has a very special place in my heart. When I first listened to this campaign, I was going through a really tough time in my life. So it is sort of a comfort listen for me. I go back to it all the time. Truly every day, I listen to some sort of content from these creators, NADDPOD in general, because I love the stories they tell. I love their values. I love the themes that they infuse into their games and their characters. And it's a great podcast to listen to if you want to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons, because they start off at level 1 and a couple of the players are learning as they're going. So you can kind of tag along with them, learn how to play, and listen to just a really fun, funny, amazing story. Speaking of long sagas, the next story on my list is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically phases 1 through 3. So starting with Iron Man, ending with Infinity War. I'm a huge nerd when it comes to comic books, superheroes, Marvel, DC. I got that from my dad. He grew up reading comics and he passed that along to myself and my brother. So I grew up reading a lot of Spider-Man and X-Men. I grew up watching Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond, things like that. So I already had a good foundation laid for me to enjoy these movies. And when Iron Man came out, and then Iron Man 2, and then they moved on to, was it Thor next? And all the other individual superhero movies, once it became clear that these heroes were going to be crossing into other movies and building up to this grand finale of all of these storylines and plot lines coming together, we got into it. As a family, we loved it. We would go see all the movies together. We would talk about them afterwards. We would compare them to the comic books. My dad has a huge well of knowledge of all of these characters going way back to like their very first appearances in comics. So he was able to tell us what they had changed from the past, what they kept the same. And look, you can say what you want about the MCU and the movies. Some of them were bad, some of them were amazing. But for these studios, producers, writers, directors, actors to all come together and create a cohesive story that spans almost a decade of movies, to have everything come together in a satisfying way is impressive. That's crazy. That's the first time that this has been done in the history of cinema, and they did it really well. Again, there's some pitfalls, there's some things that we don't talk about that don't quite line up, but overall they did a really good job. It was really enjoyable. It was visually stunning. It was heart-wrenching at the end. And especially since I was sort of living it, we were waiting, year to year for these movies to come out. What's going to come next? What new characters are they going to bring in? What new plot lines are they going to introduce that they will then weave into the main storyline? It was so much fun to follow these characters throughout all of these movies, to see where they started, to see where they ended up, and to see everything sort of come together at the end. Number 8 on my list of favorite stories is a book. The book is called Just Ella. It was written by Margaret Peterson Haddix. It is a sort of retelling of the Cinderella story, and it follows the main character, Ella, after she won the prince's heart and went to the ball and wore the glass slipper and became the princess. This story asks the question, what if it's not happily ever after? What happens then? What are the challenges and problems that a girl might face when she has grown up as a commoner and is now suddenly a princess? How does she navigate becoming royalty? How does she adapt to the culture of court life? And I read this book many times when I was a kid. I really enjoyed it. I can't remember if this was the first sort of fairy tale retelling that I read and loved, or if this was just one of the many fairy tale retellings that I read and loved, but it's definitely up there as one of my favorites. And it's a really good reminder, especially for young girls or young women, that not everything is as it seems. Sometimes being a princess isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's one thing to find your happily ever after. It's another thing to maintain it. And while I am definitely a romantic and I love fairy tales, I also love stories that kind of twist these fairy tales in a different way and ask new questions. Because in this book, things don't really go well for Ella after she captures the heart of the prince and becomes the princess. It's very different from the fantasies that she had in her head, and she has to now sort of contend with that. And there are many, many challenges and obstacles that come up along the way. And she has to sort of stand on her own and rely on herself and think for herself and stand up for herself in ways that she didn't really expect. I just absolutely love fairy tale retellings as a genre. I would love to dive deeper into that in another video, so let me know if that's something you would want to see. All right, moving on, we're going to swing back around to Dungeons and Dragons. This next story on my list is also a Dungeons and Dragons actual play show, not a podcast, but an actual visual TV show called A Star-Struck Odyssey. Now, this story is just one campaign out of many in the Dimension 20 series on Dropout, which is a wonderful streaming service. I highly recommend you go subscribe, check out all of their shows. Starstruck Odyssey is another space fantasy. It is wonderful. It is wacky. It is wild. It is definitely a comedy, first and foremost. It is very funny. I am a big fan of all of the actors within that show as well. Two of them are actually part of Not Another D&D podcast that I mentioned earlier. So part of my love for this show is just part of my love for the people who are playing these games. And it's really hard to give a simple summary of A Starstruck Odyssey. I mean, the end goal is that they are technically saving the universe, but the way that you get there is just bizarre at times and unexpected and hilarious. So I believe the whole first episode of it is available for free on YouTube under Dimension 20. I'll probably leave a link in the description if you want to go check it out for yourself. I just spend the entire time I'm watching it smiling and laughing. If I need a little pick-me-up, I'll go on YouTube and watch compilations that people have put together of their favorite moments or funniest moments from this show. It is well worth the time it's going to take to watch it. All right, we are getting down to the final four here. The next story on this list is Spider-Man. 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 Now, I mean, sort of the general story of Spider-Man. It has obviously gone through many different iterations between the comic books and the movies, but the baseline plot of this kid who loses a family member, gets bitten by a radioactive spider that gives him special powers, how he uses these powers to protect his city and the people he loves, how he balances being this masked superhero with also being a kid in high school, how Peter Parker is just classically a witty, funny, kind of happy-go-lucky kind of guy. I think Spider-Man has some of the best villains out of all of the superheroes. His rogues gallery is just very fun and interesting. And I am going to narrow it down to one specific Spider-Man story, again, just because it's nostalgic for me. I grew up with this series. It is the Ultimate Spider-Man graphic novels. I think they launched in 2000 and ran until like 2010 or 2011. My parents had a giant book. It was a compilation of the first 5 volumes of this series. And then after that, they would buy the rest of them kind of as they came out, as they were published. And I remember spending summers just sitting, flipping through, reading and rereading these stories. The art style of these graphic novels was beautiful as well. I think they covered all of the classic Spider-Man stories, from Green Goblin to Doc Ock to Venom to Carnage. It was very believable that these were literally just teenagers who were going through some pretty crazy stuff. If you like graphic novels, if you like Spider-Man, I highly suggest you find and read this series. Number 11, this is the other book on my list. It is the Harperhall Trilogy by Anne McCaffrey. This short series is set in a world called Pern, which is a creation of the author Anne McCaffrey. She has many other books in the series that I haven't read, and I actually probably should, especially now at this point as an adult. I think that this trilogy was more geared towards young adults, so I read it when I was a kid. And it's sort of a coming of age story of this girl named Menali, who is a musician. She has a talent for writing and performing music in a world where that's mostly a man's job. So she's trying to sort of find her place in all of that. And she also becomes the caretaker of 6 small dragons. And as a young girl who would have done anything for a dragon, I really lived out my fantasy of that through this character in these books. I really enjoyed the world building of Pern. It felt like a very rich, diverse place that had a lot of depth and thought behind it, which, knowing that many of Anne McCaffrey's books are set in the world of Pern, makes sense. She's had a ton of time and a ton of space to really flesh out this world, and that definitely comes across through these books. And I mean, come on, it's dragons. It's dragon riders. It's dragons as companions. It's every little girl's dream. It was my little girl's dream. And still to this day, if you told me that there was even a sliver of a possibility that I could become a dragon rider, I would drop everything in my life and go pursue that. I 100% would do that. We are down to the final 2 stories, number 12 and then our bonus 13. So number 12 is a movie. I'm going to throw it back to the 80s. It is The Princess Bride. This is without a doubt one of the best fantasy adventure movies of all time. It is based on a book. I actually didn't know that until I was doing a little bit of research for this video. So maybe I'll go back and read the book now. But as a movie, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's got everything you would want. It's got swords and swashbuckling. It's got giants. It's got fantasy creatures. It's got adventure through dangerous forests. It's got evil princes. It's got comedy. It's got romance. It has daring and honorable heroes. It has beautiful heroines. If you want a fun adventure movie that you don't have to think too hard about, but is still engaging and compelling, I recommend The Princess Bride. We are down to the final story on my favorite stories list. Drum roll, please. Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, of course, of course. I grew up watching this show. I remember waiting for the 3rd and final season to come out. I remember loving the 3rd and final season. Everything about the show is perfect. The characters, the world building, the plot lines. It's another one of those stories that starts off very fun and young and lighthearted. And as the characters grow up throughout the series, the story grows up with the characters. And by the end, they are these powerful, amazing benders who are trying to save the world, facing this big bad guy who truly wants to kill them. And they have to band together and face the deepest, darkest parts of themselves in order to overcome these challenges and obstacles and ultimately save the world. I could truly go on for days about Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's so much to talk about. There's so much detail put into the world building and the characters. Again, these characters are all very flawed and believable. They have good hearts. They are trying their best. They want what's best for themselves and for the world. But of course, they make mistakes and they have emotional outbursts and they make selfish choices like all of us do. But that's why you can really connect with them. And that's why you get invested in their story, why you want to see them win in the end. This story has one of the best redemption arcs in all of fiction, in my opinion, and is not afraid to get deep and go dark, especially for the end, especially for being a kids' show on Nickelodeon. They do tackle some very serious themes and moral and philosophical questions. There is a lot of true violence that is perpetrated throughout the series. And while it is at times very lighthearted and comedic, it is also at times very serious. And it is a great watch for kids. It's also a great watch for adults. I think that anyone of any age is going to enjoy Avatar: The Last Airbender and be able to get something out of it. And that is it. Those are my top 13 favorite stories of all time. Now, I want to hear from you guys. Do any of your top stories match any of my top stories? What does this list say about me? Are there any glaring similarities between all of these? Do you want separate videos for any of these stories? Some of them I would love to dive into more and go into more depth about why I love them. We can have a very spoiler-full discussion. What are some of your favorite stories? Do you think that I would like them? Give me some recommendations in the comments below. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, head down to the comments so we can chat, and I will see you in the next one.